Hello, welcome to the Sound of Science, the place where we deconstruct unscientific bogus and silly scams. Let's go get them. Hello, you wonderful critical thinkers. Recently I discovered this older video of James Tour having a conversation with William Lane Craig and John Lennox. Now, I've never before made a video about James Tour because I simply never thought him to be interesting enough. Within the community of Christian apologists, Craig and Lennox are considered to be among their greatest thinkers. Yes, they actually believe that Craig and Lennox are the best they got to offer, which in itself is pretty hilarious. But James Tour, not so much. I don't think that even his fellow Christian apologists consider him to be a great thinker of sorts. On the other hand, I've never thought that James Tour was funny enough to present him to you for comedy value, and the way that James Tour embarrassed himself in the debate with Dave Farina cannot be beaten in any way. So again, I had little reason to make a video about him, until I discovered this video of Craig, Lennox and Tour having this conversation. I thought perhaps this would be worth making a video about. Let's see what funny stuff we can discover.
The excursus that I've written on the origin and evolution of life. This required me to start learning about organic chemistry and, all of these things like enantiomers and stereoisomers and things like this.
This already begins pretty funny, because this looks like William Lane Craig discovering that if you want to learn something, you actually need to do some reading. He seems genuinely surprised about that.
There is a movement among contemporary Christian philosophers to say that faith doesn't require belief, that you can have faith in God without believing that God exists.
What does that even mean? What a bunch of total nonsense. Yes, we are Christian philosophers. Yes, and we think that you can have faith in Harry Potter without believing in Harry Potter. These people just spout utter silliness and call themselves philosophers.
Their motivation is good, I think. They want to make room for doubters in the Christian church, and to say even though you're in doubt about whether God exists, you can still trust in him and act on this.
Oh dear, William Lane Craig is so dumb. He totally blew their cover. These guys are not philosophers. They're from the Christian marketing department, and they try to win back some lost souls by saying, if you no longer believe in God, you can still come back, and then we will retry to brainwash you.
I come up against, in the scientific world, a huge confusion as to the nature of faith.
No, John, there is no confusion about what faith is. It's just believing something without there being any evidence to prove it.
And I was quite surprised, I suppose, to find the following definition in Webster's dictionary. Faith, noun, believing where there's no evidence.
Oh dear, you found the actual meaning of a word in a dictionary. And you don't like the definition because it exposes your silly nonsense. Well, then the dictionary must be wrong.
They think that faith is a religious word, and it means believing where there's no evidence.
No, faith is not a religious word. It just means believing something without evidence, just like your dictionary says, and just like we atheists have been saying for years. It's not a specific religious word. What does happen is that you Christians try to hijack the word, and you try to give it another meaning, at which you fail miserably. But if you want to, you can demonstrate that faith is more than just believing something without evidence by simply answering this question. Is there any position that I cannot take based upon faith? We atheists are waiting for years now for an answer to that question. And even you, John, you cannot come up with anything sensible.
Perhaps we can just try to open the minds of these scientists to the philosophy of science in order to help them to see how worthwhile this is, that it's a major discipline, an important field, and that if they ignore it, they do so to their detriment and simply show their ignorance of their own field.
I won't bother you for too long with the nonsense they are producing now, but in this part of the conversation, Lennox and Craig go on a 5-minute rant about regular science supposedly not taking philosophy seriously enough. which is a total strawman argument. Most scientists do take philosophy seriously, but they just think that you guys are bad at it because your God claims violate the most basic philosophical principles, such as the epistemic concept that claims need to be supported by sufficient evidence.
And we need to help them see that they cannot afford to be ignorant of these foundational questions if they're to do really first-rate work in their own field, and try to simply broaden their horizons a little bit.
Oh yeah, sure. Scientists need to broaden their horizon instead of people like yourself who will never ever be prepared to question their own religious doctrine. Why don't you start broadening your horizon by opening up to the possibility that your God does not exist? Are you prepared to do that?
Because God has given us that capacity, every one of us, to perceive things. And when Paul's talking about the fact that there is a creator.
No, you only claim that there is a creator, and you have no evidence to back it up. This in no way shows any willingness to engage in an honest conversation. You are just spouting Christian propaganda. This is one of the things that annoys me the most about almost every Christian apologist, their sheer dishonesty. An honest Christian apologist would say this: look, I believe there is a God. Please let me present the reasons why I believe that, because that is the real truth. Christians just believe there is a God. The only fact we can establish is not the God, but the Christian believing in it. At this point, I'm almost desperate to find an honest Christian, and it's painful to say that they are very hard to find within the community of apologists anyway. And then, for a pretty long while, it's the usual Christian apologist babbling. God claim after God claim after God claim, with no evidence to back these claims up. The only funny thing is that James Tour appears to be rather impressed by Big John and Big Bill, so he remains quiet for most of the time, looking rather timid and anxious.
I have a little analogy I tell in other circumstances about my Aunt Matilda, who's baked a cake.
An analogy. Christian apologists are absolutely terrible at analogies because they don't understand how they can be used, or they do know and they just try to fool the public. But for clarity, analogies can only be used as clarifications for facts that we have already established by using evidence. Analogies themselves are not evidence and they don't prove anything. This might be hard to grasp for Christians among you because so many of you have been brainwashed by your apologists. But the fact that, for example, a painting is created by a painter does not prove anything about the universe being created or not. The only moment that you can use this painting analogy is when you had already proven that the universe is created. Then you can let the analogy kick in and say, oh, just like a painting is created by a painter. So before you have proven that the universe is created, the painting analogy is totally useless. But knowing Lennox, he's going to pretend that his cake somehow proves something about his God. And that type of silly trick, it's getting really sad by now. Okay, let's listen.
And I ask all the Nobel Prize winners to analyze it scientifically and give me an account of it. And they all come up and say what the chemistry of it is, and et cetera, et cetera. And I say, now, ladies and gentlemen, before you go, tell me why she made the cake. You physicists, now you won the Nobel Prize, sir. Why did she make the cake? Well, I can't tell you, nor can the chemist, and so on. And we'll not know unless she reveals it. Now, it seems to me at a higher level, this is what happens. God has given us sources of information.
Oh, come on. He does exactly what I predicted, and it's totally stupid. His aunt baked a cake, and we can only find out why if she reveals it to us, and therefore we can only find out what his God wants when he reveals it to us. How can anyone take this man seriously? Are there any Christians out there who think this pathetic excuse for an argument has any value? My auntie baked a cake, therefore God exists. His argument totally falls apart because his aunt demonstrably exists and cake demonstrably exists, but his God doesn't. So his aunt and her cake prove nothing about his God, and as long as he doesn't prove the existence of his God, the cake example doesn't even clarify anything. So up to now, both Lennox and Craig have only talked nonsense, and James Tour doesn't even succeed in that. It must be possible for three highly educated old men to at least say one thing that demonstrates some kind of intellect. Jeez.
God has given us the universe to study as scientists, and he's given us the ability to study it.
So again, God claim after God claim without any evidence to prove these claims. Just another day at the office for a Christian apologist.
I used to tell jokes and make the class laugh.
Yes.
Well, James, usually when I laugh at you, it's when you try to be serious.
Go to my office and I love doing my work, and I feel that Jesus is just blessing my work and he blesses me, and it's exciting to walk with the Lord. I can't imagine going to my office and not knowing that God is for me and doing these things. So
more God claims, followed by even more God claims, but as always, no evidence that proves the existence of the God and the Jesus characters.
How do you remain calm in a debate situation when the opponent is insulting and derogatory and vile in his behavior?
Yeah, good question. How do I remain polite and respectful if my debating opponent makes unproven God claims over and over again without providing any evidence to prove those claims? How do I remain polite and respectful when my debating opponent worships a God who, according to his own holy book, has drowned 1 million babies and children in a planned and systematic manner? Am I supposed to show respect to people who are fine with drowning babies and children? How do I remain polite and respectful when my debating opponent worships a God who will torture me forever if I do not obey him? How do I remain polite and respectful when my debating opponent promotes a book that explains how to beat slaves and promotes the killing of non-Christians and gay people? How do I remain polite and respectful to those people? Or should I just expose them for worshipping a horrible and evil God? Good question indeed, Bill. Have you ever considered how extremely insulting your beliefs can be to other people?
But Jim, do you want to comment on the evidence for the resurrection and how you see it's got such power?
Oh yes, I would love to hear evidence for the resurrection of the Jesus character. Finally, we're getting somewhere.
whenever I witness to people, I talk about the resurrection. I talk about Thomas sticking his hand into the side of Jesus. I talk about the blood and the water coming out, how Jesus had been dead for some time. I talk about how his appearances is appearing to over 500 people at one time.
No. You're now just telling what the Bible describes. That is not evidence. Those are the claims that we are asking you to prove. Do you understand the difference between a claim and evidence?
How he ate with them, how he met with them in Jerusalem, in Emmaus, in the road between Jerusalem and Emmaus. He met with them up in the Galilee. He met with them indoors, outdoors. He met with them on the seashore. He had a picnic with them on the seashore. He cooked a meal for them on the seashore.
Sweet mother of Gandalf, this is so annoying. Am I supposed to remain polite to these people? Which probably means that I cannot say that they are talking nonsense, even though they are talking nonsense over and over again. Don't you see the problem here? You're not providing any evidence for anything. You're just summing up stuff that is described in a story. And what we all want to know is if the things in that story actually happened. Just repeating and summing up the story itself with an anxious voice doesn't prove that anything in the story is true. This is what makes a serious conversation with Christian apologists about the God and the Jesus character basically impossible. Their whole starting point is that whatever the Bible says is true. That is what their parents, their preachers and their teachers brainwashed them with when they were kids. Most of them will never ever let go of their doctrine. So it's extra double special funny that they are the guys who just said to others that they need to broaden their horizon. The irony.
In this short conversation that I have with people where we talk about the evidence for the resurrection for about 20 minutes, I see so many people get saved. So many people accept it. How do you take an educated man or woman and get them to believe in something as amazing as a resurrection in 20 minutes? And the only way I can explain this is it must have already been written on their heart. It was already there. It's because God has done something on the heart.
No, James, there are at least two other obvious explanations for what you describe. The first is that the people you talk to are extremely gullible, which would be no surprise to me if they ended up with you in that conversation in the first place. The other explanation is what you are telling is not true. It never happened, and that wouldn't surprise me either. Well, the total conversation was almost 75 minutes long. Nothing new was said, no evidence for anything regarding the God and the Jesus character was provided. It was just three old men making God claim after God claim after God claim, with nothing to back it up. At best, it was annoying, but not even stupid enough to be funny. So, basically a waste of time. I think it's important to now and then see what these Christian apologists are up to. Who knows, someday they might bring something new to the table. Although, I've been waiting for that for a few decades now. I watched the entire conversation so that you don't have to. Anyway, thanks for watching.